Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're holding a book that, well, it lies to you.
It really does.
Right from the moment you pick it up. It says right there on the title page that it's an autobiography.
Written by a man named Rabo Karabekian.
In the, quote, frantic summer of 1987. But none of that is actually true.
Not a word of it.
We're actually holding Bluebeard, a novel by Vonnegut, and yet, despite that lie, or maybe, just maybe, because of it, this might be the most honest thing Vonnegut ever wrote about art.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? You have this hoax autobiography, as the book itself calls it, but it's being used to dig into truths that a more conventional novel might really struggle to get at.
It's like a mask that lets you be more honest than your own face.
That's a great way to put it. So for you listening, we are diving into a story that's set in a pretty specific place, a 19-room mansion.
In East Hampton, Long Island.
The whole package. It's got a private beach, a carriage house, and most importantly, the most critical part of the entire setting, a potato barn.
A potato barn that is locked, nailed shut, padlocked, and guarded by a very grumpy, one-eyed man.
Locked up tighter than a bank vault. I mean, you could practically hear the rust on the chains. And that barn, that's the engine for the whole story. It's the forbidden chamber.
Right, and if you know the old fairy tale of Bluebeard...
You know exactly where this is going.
Bluebeard was the nobleman who, well, he murdered his wives and kept their bodies in a locked room. In this story, our protagonist, Rabo Karabekian, he calls himself Bluebeard.
And the barn is his secret chamber. But instead of, dead wives,
Thankfully,
he's hiding a secret about something else entirely, about art and war, and maybe even his own soul.
So before we try to pick the lock on that barn, let's set out our mission for this deep dive. We aren't just here to recap a plot.
No, not at all.
Based on the source material, we need to do 3 specific things. First, we have to unpack the life of Rabo Karabekian, not just as a character, but as a lens. A lens for understanding some really heavy topics. Art, the trauma of war, and this thing the book calls survivor syndrome.
Right. We have to look at how that kind of deep generational trauma can reshape a person's entire life. How do you rebuild yourself after your world has basically ended?
Second, and this is a big one, we're going to step into the ring for a real heavyweight fight. It's high art in one corner. We're talking abstract expressionism, the stuff you see in museums for millions of dollars.
The Pollocks and the Rothkos.
And in the other corner, what the critics would call kitsch.
Trashy art. Sentimental pictures, stuff that serious people are supposed to look down on.
And that's a battle that is still raging today, Is art about some grand theory, or is it just about making a connection with another person?
A very relevant question.
And finally, of course, we have to solve the mystery. We need to figure out what on earth this washed-up, one-eyed painter is hiding in that potato barn. What is it that he refuses to let anyone see?
The thing he says is bigger than a bread box and smaller than the planet Jupiter.
A very helpful clue.
A classic non-clue. But it's a great mystery. And to understand the barn, I think we first have to understand the man. Let's start with a profile of Cyclops of East Hampton, as you might call him.
Let's do it. So, setting the scene with our protagonist. Rabo Karabekian is 71 years old when the book begins.
He's seen a lot.
Oh, yeah. He's got an eye patch over his left eye, he's grumpy, he's incredibly lonely, and he describes himself in one of the most memorable phrases I have ever read in my life.
He's an all-timer.
He says he looks like a gut-shot iguana.
It's just such a visceral image, isn't it? It perfectly captures that feeling of being old and battered and leathery and kind of cold-blooded.
Right. An iguana is a survivor. It's a reptile, something almost prehistoric, but gut-shot, that implies a slow, painful, sort of lingering internal wound.
He's a man who has basically stopped moving. He's a widower, twice over. His first wife, Dorothy, she took their 2 sons and just left him. His second wife, Edith, died just 2 years before the story kicks off.
So when we meet him, he is a man who is actively hollowing out. He's just rattling around this massive house, surrounded by priceless art, but he's completely estranged from his sons, Terry and Henri.
He is, for all intents and purposes, just waiting to die.
But, and this is the key, he's waiting to die in extreme luxury. And this is where his identity gets really interesting. Rabo identifies himself first and foremost as an artist, but there's a huge asterisk next to that word.
A massive one. He admits right up front that he was a lousy painter, his words. But he was a genius collector.
And that distinction is everything. It's the source of both his immense fortune and his profound shame.
It is. Rabo finds himself in New York City after World War II, and he's just hanging out with the guys who would eventually become the absolute legends of abstract expressionism.
Jackson Pollock, Mark Rothko, fictional guy named Terry Kitchen. But at the time, they weren't like gods of the art world.
Oh, not even close. They were just guys. Guys drinking in bars, completely broke, arguing about paint and canvases.
And Rabo, for reasons we'll get into, had money.
Right. And there's a very dark origin story to that money. But he became, as he puts it, a bottomless pit of money for his friends. He was the guy they went to when they were in trouble.
And he'd buy their paintings when literally nobody else wanted them. He'd buy a huge canvas for next to nothing, sometimes just to pay for a friend's dental work or to cover their rent for a month.
I think this is a really key insight the book gives you into that whole world. He didn't buy these masterpieces as some savvy investment. He wasn't thinking about the future market value.
No, it was basically charity. He was just trying to keep his friends alive.
And because he was their friend, he held on to the work. He didn't flip it. And so decades later, he wakes up and realizes he's sitting on the most important private collection of abstract expressionist paintings in the entire world.
But the tragedy of it all, and also the pure comedy of it, is why Rabo isn't famous as a painter himself, and it all comes down to a chemical disaster.
Oh, this is one of the funniest and most painful parts of the whole story. The Satine Duralux disaster. We have to unpack this because it says everything about his character and his fate.
Satine Duralux, it sounds like something you'd buy from a late-night infomercial, right?
Totally. But wait, there's more. It was marketed as a post-war miracle, a brand new acrylic wall paint that was advertised, and this is a direct quote, to outlive the smile on the Mona Lisa.
The audacity. So Rabo, being a good modern artist, embraces these new materials. He thinks, this is the future. I'm not going to use old-fashioned oils. I'm going to use this Miracle House paint for my masterpieces.
Now, he painted these enormous canvases. His magnum opus, the one he was most proud of, was called Windsor Blue No. 17.
And how big was it?
It was 64 feet long.
64 feet. Just imagine trying to stretch that canvas.
An absolute monster. And he paints it with this Satine Duralux, and he uses these colored tapes to create his lines. Very modern, very abstract.
But he didn't account for the chemistry.
He did not. And this is where the technical failure becomes a perfect metaphor for his entire life. The Satine Duralux, this miracle paint, it had a chemical reaction with the sizing. That's the sort of glue preparation they put on the canvas.
So it was a ticking time bomb.
A very slow-motion time bomb. That's the cruelest part. It didn't happen right away. It took years. The bond between the paint and the canvas just slowly, silently degraded.
And the description in the book is just brutal. Rabo talks about how years after he'd sold these paintings to museums and corporations, the images just slid off the canvas.
He describes hearing them crackle and pop in the night.
Oh, that's horrifying.
It's like his art was committing suicide in slow motion. Can you imagine that sound? You're sitting in your studio trying to work, and you just hear the death rattle of your life's work coming from the other room.
And what was left on the floor?
He says the remnants looked like colored tapes mixed with moldy Rice Krispies.
Moldy Rice Krispies. The humiliation. Just imagine you're the curator of a museum or a CEO with one of these in your lobby, and you come in one morning, and all that's left is a completely blank canvas and a pile of colorful dust on the floor.
It's the ultimate artistic failure, but it's also the secret to his success.
How so?
Because his own art literally turned to dust, he stopped painting. He didn't have the ego to keep pushing his own failed work. So what did he do instead? He collected his friends' work.
A work that didn't fall apart.
The work that didn't fall apart. And then his friends, Pollock, Rothko, they became the gods of the art world.
Yeah.
Their prices went through the stratosphere, while Rabo's own work was, being swept up by janitors.
So there's this deep, dark irony there. He survived his friends, who mostly died young or by suicide, and his own failure as an artist is what made him the guardian of their legacy, and it made him incredibly rich.
This leads to a very grim observation Rabo makes about the art market. He calls it the dead artist dividend.
The dead artist dividend.
He literally watches the value of his collection go up every time one of his friends dies. Pollock dies in a car crash. Boom, the value of his Pollocks skyrockets. Rothko commits suicide. Boom, his Rothkos are suddenly worth millions more. Terry Kitchen drinks himself to death. Same story.
So he starts to feel like a ghoul.
He feels like he's profiting from their deaths. Like, by just staying alive, he's somehow capitalizing on their tragedy.
And this feeds directly into that survivor syndrome theme we mentioned.
Hmm.
He feels guilty for being alive when the ones he considered more talented are all dead.
But that guilt, that sense of being an unworthy survivor, it doesn't start with the art world. It goes back much, much further.
Okay, so this is where we need to pivot. We've seen the gut-shot iguana in his mansion, but to understand why he's like that, we have to look at the origins of trauma section of our notes.
Right. Because Rabo's eye patch, that's from World War II. But his real trauma starts before he was even born.
It's inherited.
Deeply inherited. Rabo is the son of Armenian immigrants. But they weren't just immigrants who came to America for a better job or a new life. They were survivors.
Survivors of the Armenian Genocide, carried out by the Turkish Empire during World War I.
And the details he shares about their survival are just harrowing. They form the bedrock of his entire psychology. He describes how his mother survived the massacre in her village.
She literally pretended to be dead.
For days, lying in a pile of corpses, not moving a muscle while soldiers walked among them.
I mean, you can't even fathom the kind of strength that takes. But this creates a foundational trauma for Rabo. He wasn't there, obviously, but he carries the weight of that experience his entire life.
And there's this one grotesque but incredibly vivid detail about how his family got their start in America. It's the source of all their money.
While his mother was lying there, pretending to be dead, she was next to the corpse of an elderly woman.
And the dead woman's mouth was open.
And inside the mouth?
Unset jewels, diamonds, emeralds, rubies, just spilling out. The woman must have been trying to hide them. Rabo's mother, in the dead of night, managed to crawl away with that fortune in jewels.
It is such a Vonnegut image. It's utterly horrific, looting a corpse in the middle of a mass grave. But it's also the mechanism of their salvation.
Those jewels are what paid for their escape. They funded their immigration to America. They are the reason Rabo exists as a U.S. citizen.
So his education, his apprenticeship, the house, the priceless art collection, it's all built on a fortune found in a dead woman's mouth.
Talk about foundational guilt. You can see why he feels like he doesn't deserve his wealth. But then you have his father's story, which is just as traumatic, but in a different way.
How did his father survive?
He hid. He hid in a privy and outhouse, a toilet behind a schoolhouse. He spent days hiding in filth while his entire village was wiped out.
And that shame, that humiliation, it followed him for the rest of his life.
It completely defined him. The mother somehow seemed to be able to process the horror and look forward, but the father was just destroyed by it. In the old country, he had been a teacher, a poet.
Yeah, and in America.
He became a cobbler, a shoemaker. He refused to speak anything but Armenian at home. He felt that by surviving in a toilet while better, braver men died fighting, he had lost all of his dignity.
And this is where we get the book's specific definition of survivor syndrome.
It's the father's core belief. He believed that the good died and the wicked survived.
So if you're still alive, by definition, you must be one of the wicked ones. Or at least a coward.
Exactly. And Rabo inherits this guilt wholesale. He feels guilty for being alive when the great artists like Pollock and Rothko are dead. He feels guilty for being rich off the jewels from a corpse. It's the same pattern, just one generation removed.
There's another layer of humiliation, too, with the parent story. The Mamegonian scam.
Oh, this is just heartbreaking. So the parents have escaped with this fortune and jewels. They make it to Cairo, and they meet a charismatic con man named Mamegonian.
He hears their story, sees they have money, and he sells them a dream.
A literal dream. He sells them a fake deed to a non-existent estate in a place called San Ignacio, California. He tells them it's a paradise, a huge house, orchards, everything they've lost.
And they buy it? They travel all the way to California, and it's just dust.
It's a dusty, tiny little town in the middle of nowhere. There's no estate. There's no paradise.
Yeah.
But they stay. They have to. They have nowhere else to go.
So it's just one more layer of shame for the father. He was a teacher, and he let himself get tricked like a child. He feels like a fool in this new land.
It cements his bitterness.
Yeah.
He closes himself off from the world and just fixes shoes.
You know, there's a really interesting philosophical tangent in the book that tries to explain these kinds of drastic personality changes. Rabo discusses it with his neighbor, Paul Schlesinger. It's called the radio theory.
This is one of those classic, quirky Vonnegut concepts that's actually incredibly profound.
So what's the idea?
The idea is that human brains aren't creators. They're just receivers. We're radios. We don't generate our own thoughts or personalities. We just receive signals that are already out there in the universe. We tune into stations.
So when Rabo's father stopped being a poet and became this bitter, silent cobbler, it wasn't that his soul degraded or that he made a choice to be that way.
According to the theory, no.
Yeah.
He just tuned into a different station. The trauma of the genocide created so much static that he lost the poetry station. The only frequency that came in clearly was the bitter cobbler station.
And the same thing applies to his artist friend, Terry Kitchen, who was a lawyer and then one day just started painting wildly with a spray gun.
He just tuned into a new frequency. It's a fascinating way to look at human agency, or the lack of it. If I'm just a radio, I can't really be blamed for the music that's coming out of me, can I?
It's a coping mechanism. It removes the burden of personal failure. If the world is chaotic and cruel and makes no sense, believing you're just a receiver is, well, it's a comfort.
It's a way for Rabo to maybe forgive his father and forgive himself. It wasn't our fault. The reception just changed.
Which is a very comforting thought for someone drowning in as much guilt as Rabo is. But all of this quiet, lonely, guilty life is about to be shattered.
By the intruder.
She's a Berman.
She is a force of nature.
Ow.
She doesn't knock. She doesn't call ahead. She enters the story by trespassing.
Just walks right onto his private beach, which he paid a fortune for.
And her opening line, her meet cute, if you can even call it that, is one of the most aggressive I've ever heard.
What does she say?
She just walks up to this one-eyed stranger and says, "Tell me how your parents died."
Who asks that? It's like, hi, nice to meet you. Please immediately share the most foundational trauma of your family's history.
Circe Berman does. And that tells you everything you need to know about her. She is a wealthy widow from Baltimore. But she's not there for polite Hampton small talk. She is nosy, she's bossy, she's relentlessly curious.
And she's not intimidated by him at all.
Not in the slightest. He's used to being the scary old cyclops in the mansion on the hill. People leave him alone. She just walks right in, starts rearranging his kitchen, and scares the living daylights out of him because he has no idea how to handle her.
But she's not just some random eccentric widow. There's a twist. She has a secret identity that sets up the entire central conflict of the book, the big debate.
She does. After she's been living in his house for a while, Rabo discovers that Circe Berman is actually a pseudonym. Her real name is Polly Madison.
Polly Madison, the wildly famous author of young adult novels.
And we're not talking about, sweet stories about going to the prom. We're talking about gritty, realistic books for teenagers about drugs and sex and suicide.
So in the world of the novel, she's a huge deal, a cultural phenomenon. Kids love her books. But Rabo and his one intellectual friend, the writer Paul Schlesinger,
They look down on her. They think she writes trash, commercial garbage.
it is the absolute classic clash between high art and low art. Rabo lives in a museum, surrounded by abstract expressionism art that is supposed to be about nothing but itself, color, form, theory.
And Circe, or Polly, writes about life right now. She writes about the messy, painful reality of what teenagers are actually feeling and going through.
And there's a fantastic scene that illustrates this clash just perfectly, the wallpaper incident.
Oh, this is amazing. So Circe decides Rabo's house is too cold, too gloomy. It's an art gallery, not a home. So while he's away for a day, she redecorates.
His foyer, his grand entrance hall, he comes home and she's completely changed it.
He had these beautiful museum-quality oyster white walls. She has painted them. Oh, what was the color he used?
Baby shit brown.
Baby shit brown. And on top of this beautiful new paint job, she has hung up a collection of Victorian chromos.
Which are what, exactly?
Cheap, mass-produced sentimental lithographs. In this case, of cherubic little girls on swings holding flowers, the absolute definition of kitsch.
And Rabo is horrified. He sees it as a complete desecration of his home. It's an assault on his taste, on everything he stands for.
But Circe defends it. She gets into this huge argument with him. She says that those trashy pictures of little girls have more humanity, more soul in them than all the abstract squiggles he has hanging on his walls.
She argues that people can actually connect with them.
And she proves it. At one point, some Soviet cultural attachés visit the house to see his famous art collection, and they politely look at the Rothkos and the Pollocks. But what makes them actually weep?
The pictures of the little girls on the swings.
Exactly. It completely floors Rabo. Circe argues that those pictures aren't just sentimental junk. They represent innocence that is about to be crushed by the world, by disease, by poverty, by war, by bad marriages. She sees a whole narrative in them. He just sees bad art.
And that becomes the central debate of the book. Does art need to be about something to be valuable? Or is that emotional connection the only metric that truly matters?
It's a question that forces Rabo to re-examine his entire life and his own artistic journey. Because he didn't start out as a collector of abstract art. He started out as the exact opposite.
Which takes us back in time. We have to talk about his apprenticeship because that's the key to understanding why he has such a visceral hatred for pictures of things.
This is section 4 of our outline, and it's absolutely crucial. We're flashing back to the 1930s. Rabo is just a kid, 17 years old, and he travels all the way from California to New York City to become the apprentice for a man named Dan Gregory.
And Dan Gregory is described as the highest paid, most famous illustrator in America. You should think of him as a sort of Norman Rockwell or N.C. Wyeth figure, but with a really, really nasty streak.
A very nasty streak. Gregory is a technical master. He's a genius. He can paint a piece of wool so realistically you can practically feel the itch on your skin. He can paint a rivet on a tank so you know exactly what kind of metal it is.
But Rabo has a name for this kind of art. He calls Gregory a taxidermist.
A taxidermist. What a perfect description.
What does he mean by that?
He means Gregory paints things exactly as they look, but they're dead. There's no soul. He stuffs and mounts moments in time. He freezes them, and personally. The guy's abusive, he's incredibly arrogant, and politically, he's a fascist sympathizer. He openly admires Mussolini.
Yikes. So this is the lion's den that 17-year-old Rabo walks into, and the description of the studio is... it's just surreal.
It's insane. Gregory bought 3 adjacent townhouses in Manhattan and just knocked out all the interior walls to create this one cavernous studio.
That is huge.
It has 6 fireplaces, 52 mirrors, and it's crammed with his collection of props. Suits of armor, medieval weapons, stuffed animals, everything you can imagine. It's a chaotic museum.
52 mirrors. That says a lot about the man, doesn't it? He lives his life completely surrounded by reflections of himself.
Absolutely. He has no windows looking out onto the world, only skylights and mirrors. And in this bizarre environment, he forces Rabo to chant a specific phrase over and over again about modern art.
The emperor has no clothes.
The emperor has no clothes. Gregory despises modern art. He thinks the abstract expressionists, the very people Rabo will one day befriend and collect, are nothing but swindlers and lunatics. He drills it into Rabo's head that it's all a scam.
And he treats Rabo less like an apprentice and more like a servant, a slave, really.
Completely. But he does give him a task, a test. He starts with something he calls the counterfeit lesson.
What's that?
Gregory tells Rabo a story about his own apprenticeship back in Russia before the revolution. His master made him forge a ruble notepaper money entirely by hand. He had to draw it so perfectly that it would fool the imperial engraver himself.
And did he?
He did. The story goes that the master engraver was so threatened by how perfect it was that he tried to destroy it. But Gregory saved it, and he spent it. He proved he had surpassed his master by tricking the system.
So he gives Rabo a similar task.
He points to his chaotic prop-filled studio and says, paint this. Paint this studio so realistically that I cannot tell the painting from a photograph.
That's an impossible standard.
And Rabo does it. He spends 6 months of his life on this one painting. He paints every single dust mote floating in the sunbeams, every single water droplet on the skylights. It is a masterpiece of technical perfection.
He brings it to Gregory, his heart in his throat, and what does the master do when he finally sees it?
He burns it.
He burns it.
Without a moment's hesitation. He looks at it for a second, says, not bad, and then throws it right into one of the fireplaces.
And not bad is an insult.
In Gregory's world, not bad is the worst thing you can say. Because, he explains, the painting has no soul. It's just a perfect copy, a dead thing. And for Rabo, this is a soul-crushing moment. He realizes that mere technical perfection isn't art. It's just copying. It's taxidermy.
That whole relationship with Gregory is just so toxic. But there was one bright spot for him in that house. A woman named Marilee Kemp.
Marilee Kemp. She was Gregory's mistress. She'd been a showgirl in the Ziegfeld Follies. She was beautiful, tragic, and came from a poor coal miner's family. So she was completely uneducated when Gregory found her.
And Gregory treated her like another one of his props.
Absolutely. There's a horrific story mentioned in the book, the staircase incident.
Right. What happened there?
Gregory pushed her down a flight of stairs. She broke both of her legs and an arm. And why did he do it? Because she gave Rabo some expensive art supplies that he couldn't afford.
That's how petty and violent and controlling he was. He punished her for a simple act of kindness toward his apprentice.
But that shared experience of being under Gregory's thumb is what bonds Rabo and Marilee. They're the only 2 outsiders in this rich, fascist artist's bizarre world.
They become secret allies.
They do, and one day they commit the ultimate sin in Dan Gregory's eyes. They go to the Museum of Modern Art together.
The forbidden temple of the lunatics and swindlers.
Exactly. To Gregory, MoMA is the church of everything that's wrong with art. And somehow, he catches them. He sees them coming out of the museum on St. Patrick's Day, of all days, and he just explodes.
He kicks them both out on the spot.
Out you go. Just like that. Throws them out into the street.
And this leads to a very specific, very intimate moment between Rabo and Merrily. The notes call it the non-epiphany.
This is a fantastic concept Rabo gets from his friend Terry Kitchen later in life.
Yeah.
An epiphany, is a moment where God reveals some great truth to you.
A moment of divine insight.
A non-epiphany is the opposite. It's a moment when God just lets go of you. He stops micromanaging your life. He lets go of the scruff of your neck and just lets you be.
So Rabo and Merrily, having been thrown out of the only home they have this brief, intense sexual encounter in a storage room.
It's described as this moment of pure, unjudged freedom. The clocks stop. They're not master and mistress or apprentice and model. They're just two scared human beings finding a moment of comfort before they have to face the cold world.
But it's fleeting.
Very. Merrily leaves him almost immediately after. She looks at him and realizes he's still a little boy, and she needs a man who can protect her to survive in the world.
And her life story is wild, by the way. She goes from being a coal miner's daughter to Gregory's abused mistress to eventually marrying an Italian nobleman and becoming a contessa during the war.
While Gregory himself dies, this pathetic, lonely death in Egypt, still playing soldier and admiring fascists, it's a complete reversal of fortune.
But the key takeaway from this whole period for Rabo is that he learned perfect technique from Gregory, but he also learned to despise realism because of Gregory. He forever associates pictures of things with cruelty, with fascism, with a complete lack of soul.
Which brings us full circle, back to 1987. We have Rabo, the failed realist, who then became a failed abstract painter, a war survivor, a lonely widower. And we have the potato barn.
The mystery. The big, locked, forbidden chamber that runs through the entire book.
Rabo himself makes the comparison to Bluebeard explicit. He says the barn is his forbidden room. He has nailed the doors shut. He uses these massive industrial padlocks. And that Circe Berman, of course, is the curious new wife who is dying to know what's inside.
And Rabo just teases her. He gives all these negative clues. He says, it is not more of my old failed paintings.
Right. It's not a shaggy dog story, meaning it's not a joke or a letdown. And it's not some simple symbol like a broken paintbrush or something.
And then he gives that wonderfully useless clue. It's bigger than a bread box and smaller than the planet Jupiter.
Thanks for narrowing it down, Rabo.
But there is one real, tangible clue that Circe finds. A genuine piece of evidence.
She's snooping around his library, as she does, and she finds a book. It's a technical reference book filled with illustrations of World War II Army uniforms.
Okay, that makes sense. He was in the Army.
But the book is covered in paint fingerprints, all different colors.
Paint fingerprints, so whatever is in that barn, Rabo painted it, and it has something to do with the war.
This is where we have to synthesize everything we've talked about. Think about his journey as an artist.
Okay, so first, he was a realist painter under Dan Gregory. He learned how to paint things with photographic perfection, taxidermy.
Then during the war, he was a camouflage artist. He literally commanded a platoon of artists who specialized in creating illusions to deceive the enemy.
And then, after the war, he became a champion and collector of abstract expressionism, an art form that completely rejects realism in pictures of things.
So what could possibly be in the barn that ties all of those threads together?
It has to be a synthesis of all of them.
It's the one thing he ever created, in his words, that was more than thin air.
Okay, we have to spoil it. For the sake of the deep dive, we have to open the doors.
We have to. What is inside the potato barn is a single massive painting. But it's not on a canvas. It's a panorama, painted on 8-foot-tall panels that line the entire interior of the barn.
So it's a painting that you literally step inside of.
Exactly. And what it depicts is the valley where the war ended for him. It's a photorealistic painting of the very last day of World War II in Europe.
So he went back to realism after everything with Dan Gregory.
He went back to realism, but this time with soul. He used Gregory's taxidermist technique, the perfect details on the uniforms, the exact rivets on the tanks, the precise look of the landscape. But instead of painting a dead, soulless scene, he painted the most alive, most painful, most human moment of his entire life.
He painted the survivor syndrome.
That's it. He painted the massive, chaotic, sprawling crowd of humanity that was in that valley at that moment. Liberated concentration camp prisoners, German soldiers surrendering, American GIs, displaced civilians, skeletons, and survivors.
Yeah.
Thousands of people.
That's profound. He used the tools of the fascist taxidermist to paint the ultimate testament to survival.
Exactly. Gregory painted dead props.
Yeah.
Rabo used his skills to paint living, suffering, relieved humanity. It's a painting where there are no individual heroes. The entire crowd is the hero. It's a portrait of the moment when everyone was equal in their suffering and their relief.
So why did he hide it? Why nail the door shut and lock it away for decades?
Because he was ashamed of it.
Ashamed of his masterpiece.
He thought it was kitsch. He was so brainwashed by the high art world of his friends, the abstract expressionists, that he thought the critics would laugh at it. He thought they'd say it was just a big illustration, a giant Norman Rockwell war poster.
He was ashamed of the very thing that finally gave his art a soul.
Just like his father was ashamed of surviving, he's ashamed of the raw, emotional reality of it. But Circe, the champion of low art, is the one who makes him see that this painting isn't kitsch. It's the truth. It's the soul he'd been searching for his whole life.
So the book itself, the hoax autobiography called Bluebeard, that book is the contents of the barn.
That is the beautiful meta twist at the end. The act of Rabo writing this book for us, the reader, is his act of finally unlocking the door. He's showing us the picture. He's integrating all his different radio stations, the Armenian trauma, the war, the cruel apprenticeship, the abstract art world, into one clear broadcast.
And it totally reframes that whole high art versus low art debate. The book seems to suggest that maybe the low art, the storytelling, the representation of actual people, this stuff that connects emotionally, the kitsch, is actually the most important art of all.
It suggests that the highest purpose of art isn't theory or form. It's to bear witness. Rabo's real job wasn't to be a genius painter of colorful shapes. His job was to be a witness to the 20th century, to remember the dead, to remember the survivors, and to paint the picture.
Which brings us back to that phrase from the end of the source, the Dumb Luck Hall of Fame.
Right. Rabo spends his whole life wondering if he was just lucky. Lucky to survive the war, lucky to survive his friends, lucky to get rich.
But the book suggests that remembering isn't just luck, it's a duty. And turning that memory into art is the noblest thing a person can do.
It's a story about healing, really. He starts out as that gut-shot iguana, cold and alone and waiting to die. He ends up as a man who has finally opened his doors.
He's been rehabilitated by Circe.
Who is basically a Lazarus figure in the story. She literally brings him back to life by forcing him to engage with his past and with the present.
This has been an incredible deep dive. From the peeling paint of sateen Duralex to the diamonds in the mouth of a corpse, all the way to the great soulful secret in the potato barn.
It's a journey.
So final thought for you listening. What's in your potato barn? What part of your history, what story have you nailed shut because you're afraid it's too sentimental or too painful or just too uncool to share?
And what might happen if you finally decide to pick the lock? Maybe you'll find it's the only thing that really, truly matters.
Something to think about. Thank you for this.
My pleasure.
And to you, listening, go check your padlocks. We'll see you next time.